So the lighting is always off in here, and it is also 1 p.m. So the lighting is going to change as I film this, so just bear with me. What's up, guys? It's Nora, and I'm back today to share with you guys a story that I've been wanting to share for years, but I felt like it had not been enough time since it happened for me to be able to share it and like not get in trouble for it. And that is the story time of how my professor, or when my professor in college, slammed my laptop shut. All happened my sophomore year when I was in my pathology class. It was my pathology professor. And since I am 3 years almost out of college, practically 3 years out of college, I didn't want to owe any money to the school. I didn't want the school to really have any more connections to me at all. I didn't want there to be anything that they could come at me with, because I am sharing this story and sharing the misconduct of one of their staff members. And I believe she is technically still teaching some of their online stuff. But that doesn't matter, because we're going to get into the story. This was sophomore year, pathophysiology. We're going to call this Professor Nancy. That's what we're going to call her. It was her first year teaching at this college that I went to. The previous professor had left, didn't want to teach anymore. So they brought this random lady in last minute. I remember looking at my schedule, and the professor's name, this class didn't have a professor until the very last minute. And up until this point, this was probably 3/4 of the way through the class that this actually happened. I didn't have any problems with this teacher. She was crazy, psycho, had some authority issues, as in, if she's not the authoritarian, she had some issues. She wanted to be the one that was in control and the top dog, I guess I would say. She was crazy. We already knew that she was crazy. But again, up to this point, I really hadn't had any conflicts with this woman. And like I said, it was 3/4 of the way through the class. And how these classes go at my school is that pretty much everybody sits in the classroom. You sit there for whatever the length of time the class is, and you just sit and listen while they read off a PowerPoint. Now, that's important because for people like me who have ADHD, reading off a PowerPoint is not how I learned. These classes were just any of the classes at the school, because that's the way the school decided to teach, were just absolutely miserable for me. The only learning for me was done by myself in my dorm room and me self-teaching myself. These classes I could not focus with. I was not able to sit and go with the PowerPoint on my computer like they wanted us to. No, because me sitting there just listening to someone talk for 80 minutes doesn't work for me. That's just not how I learn. And I'd run out of my mind, and my mind would be elsewhere. It doesn't matter if I'm sitting there listening to you. My mind is elsewhere because I'm ADHD. So like I said, front row. These classes were absolutely miserable. Usually I was not doing what I probably should have been doing in class. I will take the hit for that one. That's my fault. But usually I'd if there was any other assignments or anything that I needed to get done that I could type out or whatever, I would also be doing those assignments at the same time. For anyone who watched me study in college, I literally, to read a book, I had to have a TV show going in front of me. That's just how my brain works. That helps me focus. So I would sometimes be doing other assignments or things on my computer. This teacher usually stood at the front of the class and would just talk the entire time. She wouldn't walk down the aisle. She would literally just stand at the front. Well, this day, I think she was ready and out for a fight, because this was the only time that she had ever walked down the freaking aisle of this classroom. And that day, I hadn't actually been doing anything too weird. Sometimes I used to shop online or something when I'd get bored. But this day, I particularly had a few tabs open, and I remember this, and you'll know why later on. I had one tab open that had my Brightspace, was the platform that we used. We had my Brightspace grades up, and then I had opened, at the point of this time that this happened, another tab, because I had a question pop in my head, because we're in pathophysiology. I had a question in my head about pathophysiology pertaining to a previous clinical day that I had, and I was looking up something about pneumonia. I don't remember what it was that I was specifically looking up, but I was looking up the pathophysiology of pneumonia. I was looking at pathophysiology in pathophysiology, but that's not what the PowerPoint was on. So that's where the issue comes into play. So this teacher decided that she was going to pick a fight this day, and that was very, very obvious. She walked down the aisle, clearly saw that I was not the only student that was not on this PowerPoint or doing PowerPoint. And she walked all the way to the back. So I highly, highly, highly doubt that I was the only one that wasn't on the PowerPoint, but for some reason she decided to have me pick the fight. But she walked up behind me in front of an entire class of students. So this was witnessed. I had witnesses. And she decided to lean down, get right behind my ear, and said something along the lines of, if you're not gonna participate in class or do what you need to do in class, then you can get up and leave. Clearly indicate, like, something along those lines of, like, you aren't supposed to be doing what you're supposed to be doing in class, and if you don't want to do that, you can get up and leave. When I looked back after it happened, I wish I would have stood up and walked out. I do. I wish I would have gotten up and walked out, because that would have been better and probably would have been a big FU to her, but I didn't. I decided to stay. And so because of her saying that, I, in front of her with my computer, exited out of that tab where I was looking up the pathophysiology of pneumonia. So what did it leave my computer? I literally, at that point, and I had, since I exited out of that tab, the previous tab that was left open, and so I exited out of that tab, my grades were up, I sat back and crossed my arms, as in, like, okay, I'll sit here and listen to you. I, at that point forward, had not touched my computer at all. And obviously, that's pretty obvious since I was in the front row of the class. It's not like I was, like, hiding in the back, like, touching my computer again. Like, I literally exited out of the tab and sat back. So she proceeds to teach, and everyone's like, okay, because I also was a quiet kid in class. I usually, like, didn't talk either. Unless I, like, really liked the teacher or was, like, super into the conversation. I really did not speak. She continued to teach, and then walked down the middle aisle again, walked up again, had not touched my computer at this point, had just left it where she had spoken to me, and she then leaned down again behind my ear and said, if you're not going to sit and listen and participate in class, then you don't need this. And she took my laptop and shut it and slammed it. It wasn't just it was a slam. Like, the whole class was like, oh, shit. She slammed my laptop shut. You touched my belongings. You don't have a right to touch my belongings. And again, I hadn't touched my computer. I was sitting there listening to you just like you asked me to. But no, you decided to pick a fight and slam my laptop shut. You don't have the right to slam my laptop shut. And again, if she had just closed it, I'd have been like, okay, whatever, this lady's just, like, nasty. But when you slam my laptop shut to the point where it makes a noise, that's where I have an issue. So, this point forward, I just sat there. I refused to make eye contact with her. I should have, at this point, just gotten up and left, and I didn't. And I wish I had the confidence to, but I didn't. So I literally sat there. The entire class stared at the floor, did not listen at all to her. I was so angry. One of the moments I've probably been the most angry ever in my life. She had no right to do that. And I just refused to give her the time of day. I refused to give her the acknowledgement that I was going to sit there and, like, be subordinate to her and listen to her the rest of the class. Because what you just did was not right. I don't care who you are. You had no right to do that. And so, after the class finished, and again, she did this in front of, like, 25 to 30 other students. So it's not like I just, like, made this story up. It happened. So I leave class. I go to an area outside of our classroom in that building that we had all of our classes in, that had a student lounge, and I immediately sat down, pulled my computer out, and I wrote an email immediately to the assistant director of nursing, because we at the time didn't have, like, a main director of nursing of our program. She was the acting main one since she was the assistant one, and I immediately laid out exactly what happened, what she said word for word. You know, I might pull it up. I might pull up the email to see if I can find it. But yes, I messaged her and said exactly what happened word for word, and told her that this was not okay, and I would like to have a meeting with her about it because this would not be acceptable. Guys, I found the email. Okay. So I'm sorry if this is, like, broken. I haven't read this. It literally happened in 2017. So I had never met with this professor before, so I essentially introduced myself, said, hey, I'm taking this class with this blah 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 professor, with Nancy, and I said, I want to let you know about an incident that happened today in class. Class began with Professor Nancy talking to all of us about how terrible the grades were that we got on exams because She also was found to have scored our exams based on how she felt about us. Now this happened the second semester where did not have to take her class, but it was found that she was literally scoring people's exams, giving people whatever scores that she wanted even though they had the same answers, and it was found out that this happened. But regardless, I said, so she talks about how terrible our grades are and how she was not going to scale them, and began asking questions. Oh, okay, so I don't remember this. So I said I had asked her a question. I said, I know a lot of students worked and studied really hard in anticipation for this exam, and it did not go well. Are you going to do anything different to the upcoming exams? Because right now many students cannot pass the course with the first exam grades they received. Like their grades were so bad that it didn't matter what they did the rest of the course because of how this teacher did this. I said this was very much agitated her, and she responded to my question with an attitude. Class then continued on. She taught, and she looked at my computer screen, which showed I was looking up pneumonia and pathophysiology, that I remember correctly. And I said, what is wrong with looking up a disease in a class about diseases? I said this bothered her to the point that she spoke up in front of everyone and told me to stop surfing the web. Okay. Those are the words that she used, in quotation marks. I said I responded that I was looking at pneumonia, and this continued to agitate her even more because she told me it was irrelevant to pay attention. So this was the point where I exited out and my Brightspace grades were stuck up. She again began teaching. As I closed out my tab with pneumonia, I returned to my previous tab with my grades from Brightspace. Things I remember. She again took notice minutes later as I'd stopped using my computer and my grades were still up. But I was listening to her, and she again called me out in front of the class, but this time got in my face and told me to actively participate or to leave. I responded to her that I was indeed going to listen, and with that she raised her hand and slammed my laptop shut aggressively. Not only was this behavior unprofessional from her, and it's not okay that she touched my property or any other student's property. So due to this happening, I wanted to email you and let you know the behavior that she displayed in class. I was targeted and humiliated. End case. She said that I needed to have a direct conversation with this professor, and that she would be happy to meet with me. But that didn't go exactly how she said it was going to go. So I wanted to meet separately with her. This conflict was not going to be resolved with this professor. This professor continued to have many, many conflicts the second semester, to the point where she was no longer to teach in person, which is why she only teaches online for this college. And she was only there to teach because they were giving her a discount on her master's program to be a nurse practitioner. No, a nurse anesthesiologist. I went to go have a meeting with this professor. Again, I had my story straight. I was very, had the same story over and over again. I show up to have this meeting with my professor, assistant director woman, and guess who's in the meeting without telling me? Professor Nancy. Love it. What we used to say at my college is that, and we used to say that, and I don't know if this is true, but we used to literally say it's in the professor's contracts that they, even though if one of them does something wrong, they are supposed to support each other. Yes, things may happen behind closed doors, and I don't know what discipline, if any, this Professor Nancy received any, but I hope she did, and I think it was pretty obvious that she did, because we'll get onto that afterwards. So I ended up in this meeting. For anyone who knows me knows I cry when I get really angry. I get very frustrated, and I just cry because I get pissed. I've always been that way. So I got into this meeting. We discussed what happened. Professor Nancy tried to change her story 10 different times and tell me how I was doing things wrong. I sat there and the entire time continued to go over the fact, she wanted to be well, you were doing that. And I said, it doesn't matter what I was doing in class. You had no right to touch my or any other person's property. That is our personal property. I said, God forbid I had a document open. What if I had notes open for that class and you shut it and it died or something? Or what if you damaged my laptop? You don't know that my laptop could have already been broken. You don't know that I could have lost precious documents on that had I not shut it down the wrong way. Regardless of any of that, you had no right to touch my property. My property. That was the point that I was trying to get into this. And also the fact that I was very much targeted. She literally this whole meeting was scoffing and was you weren't targeted. Oh yeah, I bet. And was crossing her arms. So this entire meeting was so unprofessional. And this poor assistant director was trying to back her butt up, because obviously that was her staff member that was on her. But it was very obvious that she was trying to lie and mix the situation, and it was very obvious I had continued the entire time in this meeting, had the exact same story. My story did not change. There was not one detail that had switched. I kept repeating myself the exact same story of what had happened to be proof that I was not lying and that this teacher was just like fluffing it up. So essentially the meeting, it still got spun on me because, again, like I said, they're still supposed to, as professors, support each other. So I was told that I, further on in class, and also I had gone over about how I have ADA accommodations, which is illegal for them to discriminate against, and that I have ADHD, and it is known that I have ADHD, so I should be continuing to sit in the front of the classroom. But then the teacher was like, they were like, no, well, since you were in the wrong here, we need to make up a plan for you for the rest of the class so that you can be successful. I actually had gotten good grades in that class. I never once got close to failing that class, and I think also after this, there were a lot of eyes on the grades that she was giving me, specifically because of what had happened. So I think had she tried to fail me, that wouldn't have flown. But I had not been in a position of failing in this class. I had been in a good position. I hadn't failed any other course. There were a lot of my classmates that had, and also failed this course. She failed them out specifically. But they decided to spin it on me, because obviously that's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to protect each other. And they were like, well, what you're going to have to do is sit in the back of the classroom. Fine, whatever. I still continued to do exactly what I typically do the rest of the class. I didn't speak up once again. I did not give her the time of day or the enlightenment as if she was some great-ass professor, because she definitely was not. And then later on, when they announced that she was going to be the professor for pharmacology, which is an even harder course that even more of the students in my grade failed out of, I was like, no way in the world am I going to be taking this course. But my school is extremely difficult. They do not accept credits from elsewhere. They do not let you transfer out because they make it so that the credits at that school cannot be used at state schools or anything. So if I wanted to go to another university, I would have to start over the entire nursing program at that university and be a freshman again. When this all came about, I decided, let me see if I can take a pharmacology course from another school. Because I know that some kids had failed out some courses, and over the summer, from like the previous fall, over the summer they were able to take certain courses online through other schools. So what I did was I specifically went again to this assistant director professor. I knew there might be some pushback. I walked in, I had a paper with me. I'd already looked up, and my mom and parents knew about the situation, so my parents were were willing to help me dish out the money to take this course through another school. And I'd already looked up and talked to other staff members about what other courses students had been allowed to take through other schools. So it was another main school that I took it technically through. And I walked into her office thinking I was going to have to state my case as to why I wanted to take pharmacology elsewhere. And I walked in and said, hi, I'd like to discuss taking pharmacology at a different school. I have all the information on this paper. I hadn't chosen specifically what school yet, but I had the few that I looked up that were price friendly. And she looked at me and said, okay, took the paper, signed it, and then gave me resources as to what schools I could take it through. Now this was very on the hush down low, because she did not, she didn't want it to get out that I'd taken pharmacology online, and some of my classmates knew because it was a small school, but she didn't want anybody else being like, oh my god, I don't want to deal with this teacher anymore. So a lot of the students in my class did have to take that pharmacology class with her. I think I was the only one that didn't. She failed so many people out. It was ridiculous. And I was privileged enough because of what had happened to take pharmacology online. Now I sucked at pharmacology. I think had I taken it with her, I probably would have failed it. No doubt about it. But because of what happened, I think that by her responses to me after that meeting, I think she knew that this teacher was definitely in the wrong, and I think that she knew that I could probably somehow bring some kind of legal action to school if things didn't resolve. And so I didn't have any issues with this professor past then, because I think all eyes were on her, and she continued to make bad choices in terms of other students. This professor had literally, during the pharmacology course, almost every single class students were walking and crying. That's not right if you're a professor. Like, that's not right. It sucked for me to watch my classmates walk out of class crying every single day because of how mean and how rude and obnoxious and how just her behavior was. But in the end, it did help me pass pharmacology. I never failed out of a course in nursing school. And that was the story of how my teacher slammed my laptop shut. And you best bet that she was not going to get away with it when she did something like that to me. Because that's not right. And I'm going to speak up if something's wrong. So I hope you guys enjoyed. It wasn't a dramatic story. I don't know. There was a lot to it. There was a lot of details that I threw in, a lot of things that repeated. So thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys next time.